This week on the Old School RuneScape Update, we recap how this podcast started and where we are today. Our journey covers where we started Old School, the mid-game, and everything that comes next. We share our favorite moments and break all taboos before quickly glancing ahead at the future. This is the Old School RuneScape Update, episode 82, recorded Saturday, August 9th, 2025. Also nostalgia. Hello everybody and welcome back to the Old School RuneScape Update. Sirion and myself are in as we have been each and every week for the last 3 weeks or so. That was part of
and most design. Of the last 2 years.
That was almost 2 years. Almost 2 years. It was 2 years in October, I believe, is what we were going for. But of course, this week is a bit of a different week because we are ending the Old School RuneScape Update after this episode for a finite amount of time. Because, you know, nothing in life is infinite, right?
Sure.
That's what I'll say on that.
For an indefinite amount of time, maybe is the right word to say.
Yeah, that works. But, of course, if you guys want the full show notes, over to those at update.show/OS. And, of course, we do have the community Discord if you want to hang out with us after the fact. Update.show/Discord, and the friends chat can be found in-game at BitsBytes. I'm not going to tell you to subscribe to the podcast because, you know, you might not get anything next week or the week after or the week after that.
Well, you will not get anything in the next few weeks, but you should subscribe in case we decide to come back.
Either permanently or for something ad hoc, but there's no guarantees about that. And we're just gonna, you know, I feel like this is an episode where I can just talk and I don't need to have opinions about the game that, you know, were formed in the last week or so. So the start of this episode begins at the end here. Why we're ending the show. And the reality of that is simple, folks. I've, for the most part, stopped playing Old School RuneScape. This is something that probably became apparent to people around the start of this year. It really started, I think, with Leagues 5, and then that combined with the group Iron Man on RS3, and just in general, how I felt about Old School looking back at it, has led me to the idea that there's aspects of Old School RuneScape that I really don't like. And with that, it's something that I made that decision, you know, well, I don't necessarily need to play this. I could play a different RuneScape that ticks many more boxes, and that's kind of where I was at with this at the start of the year, rolling into spring and whatnot.
Yeah, this is really something that I mean, we talked about a lot, the two of us as well. I think, you know, all of this, like the game and the way it's set up, it is really important that you don't burn yourself out over it. And this is advice I would give to all of you, right? There is nothing that you owe to RuneScape as a game. There's nothing you have to do necessarily. So, you know, if you don't have fun with it, stop it, take a break, and if the urge to play comes back after some time, great, go back to playing again. And if it never comes back, then it never comes back. And that's sort of what we're doing with this show as well. You know, when we started this show, it made sense. It made a lot of sense to do this show. I don't think we regret it, any of it. But now we're getting to a point where, you know, we're in a position where it just wouldn't make sense to continue on it, so we aren't.
Yeah, and another thing that initially brought me to OS at the start was that this was in RS3's really dark spot where there was no rudder. The plan for the content was nowhere to be found. It resulted in one of the game's biggest U-turns at the time that culminated in an executive producer leaving in early 2024. So that last bit of 2023 and the first quarter of 2024 were some of the sparsest periods for RS3 updates at the time. And, you know, we started this quest push about 9 months before we started the show, so it was a natural fit that, well, you know, if there's no major direction for RS3 and if there's no major pieces of content for RS3, this is the next logical step for that. And one of the things I was very aware of coming into this show is that I needed us to know, and I needed the listeners to know, and I needed, in particular, the listeners of the RS3 show to know, is that this show was not a response to Hero Pass, because there were so many content creators that up and left on the RS3 side over Hero Pass. But mechanically wise, of the actual thing, you and I were two of the people that actually liked the thing. It was just how Jagex responded to it that was a little bit troublesome.
I quit not over Hero Pass. I quit over the fact that they brought daily challenges back. So I know
it's a lack of a backbone. It's a lack of a backbone.
It's a very spicy opinion, and I think it is an unpopular opinion, especially across the RS3 community. But yeah, I thought Hero Pass was fine.
Yeah.
Perfect? No. Fine? Yes. And the fact that
Yeah, and, you know, we're going to have those same discussions when the MTX conversations end about XP and whatnot, because that is a problem with RS3. And if you want to hear that, update.show. I can guarantee you that we'll be talking a lot about that. But I think we've already been to the next point about why we started the show. One other thing I do want to add on to that was that this show effectively began as a discussion between the both of us in the real world about what a RSBNB update RuneScape podcast would look like if it was starting from first principles, from the ground up. And OSRS update was the perfect vehicle for that, because the RS3 show has so much legacy behind it. It's like one of those big oil tankers out on the sea. You can't just turn it around, and you can't just stop it on a dime. Yeah, it's got so much inertia with that.
If people have gotten to know me over the past 2 years or so that we've been doing this show, like, one of the things that for me is really important in the context of doing a show like this and doing content like this is I don't want to ever grow complacent. I want to keep pushing myself. I want to keep making changes. I want to keep, evolving things and making things better. Which, first of all, started becoming really hard. I did notice that, especially because we have, at least I in the game, have also reached some point where, like, there's this grind, right? That's the plateau, the early late game plateau, if you want to call it that. And with the fact that we weren't questing as much anymore, it was becoming harder and harder to keep the show at the high production level that I wanted. But it was definitely one of the reasons why getting this blank canvas on Old School was so important to us, because Shane can attest to this. I tend to be the guy, even though I'm not playing RuneScape 3 actively anymore, to come into those production discussions and just throw like a bomb or two in there just to try and get that show to do different things every now and then.
Yeah, and that's one thing I was going to say, is that going forward, that's something that we've been trying a lot more with the RS3 show. People will note in particular the most recent Amasket episode there. Normally we have me plus another host on, but what we did this time is we just went me plus 3 domain experts who were relatively highly skilled at killing the boss in terms of its hard mode and rages. And that same sort of idea to do something different like that is not something that we would have done before OSRS update. So there's been many things that OSRS update that have provided me for learnings in terms of producing shows and whatnot. And that's one thing it's just been so good for in that regard. Now, you mentioned in your bit about the beginning of the show in terms of getting to that midpoint of the game and that beginning of the higher end of the game, and that was the beautiful thing about this podcast, is that initially this show was just, what have we been doing in OSRS? That was the first thing that we attacked on each episode, and then if it was something related to the week's update, that was the show solved. It was perfect. And how do you do that when you get into the higher levels of the game? It's a very interesting question. And I think at that point, in that, I'm just, grinding woodcutting to level 85 for however many hours, or, I'm just doing whichever Slayer task or whichever boss, that becomes a little bit less appealing over time, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I do think that I've sort of hit my stride a little bit in the recent weeks and months, that I'm getting to exploring a bunch of PVM things, unlocking a bunch of new higher level training methods. Like, I've been doing some sepulcher lately. Of course, I've been doing a bunch of raids, which, oh my god, when we started the show, if you had told me that that's where it would be right now, I would not have believed you. But so I do think we could have made it work, but I have a full-time job, I have other hobbies I want to maintain as well. It got to a point where we're not full-time content creators for Old School, and if you want to, especially when the grinds get a little bit longer, if you want to have interesting content to talk about every single week, you need to put your hours in. And you didn't want to, and I didn't have the time to. And that's sort of where we ended up going, right? But I do love that we now have documented most of our mid-game journey, because I think a lot of content creators we see actually a recent influx of a lot of World of Warcraft players, of course, and we have like the Unguided series. So we do have other versions of this where I do think it's really interesting to get a fresh perspective on the game, and at some point you stop having that.
Yeah, and to flip that on its head, when we started OS, it was nothing. I think I had level 9 woodcutting. I don't even remember when I logged in to get that before that, but I think the starting point for me was that I did the 2022 Christmas event, and then after that came the idea to do the questing, and then it was just get all the levels for Quest Point Cape, and then as painful as some of those might have been, I'm looking at you, Slayer, in that regard. You get to that mid to high tier account point, and then you question, well, what happens next? And for me, it was a question of, on the skilling side, let's go down the skilling list, and are there skills here that I could train to 75, 80, 85, and then are there any that I want to take to 99? Yes, those options are there, and I could do that. And again, I'm saying the one thing that probably prevented me from just throwing myself into that was the group Iron Man on RS3 for a time reason. And this is something that the listeners might not have picked up on over the almost last 2 years of this, is that it doesn't matter to me if I'm necessarily having fun at something. I will just will myself to do it. As in, I could have made a list and I could have went for all the skills to get the achievement diaries or the task sets done here, and I could have just skilled through that, and that could have been my 2025 on RuneScape. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. But there was just something else that I was doing instead. And I know you don't necessarily agree that that's the right angle to take at the game, but it's definitely something I could have done.
Mm-hmm.
So, anything else on where we're at right now before we move on to the beginning?
Nope.
Okay. So, do you want to go first or should I? Because I have a spicy take with this.
Where we began, you mean?
Yeah, our first impressions of the game.
I find it very hard to remember. I remember being very surprised. To me, my old school addiction really took me by surprise. The thing that I think old school, especially early game, does really well is it creates this cadence of you do a quest, you hit a level, you hit another milestone, you do another quest, you do another quest, right? Like, even though the early game experience in old school definitely needs work, and there's been a lot of chatter about that actually in the community on this front, I do feel that it has this energy of, it's bedtime, but I can do this one more thing, right? I can do this one more farming run. I can do one more tiny quest. And that is really, I never really decided on playing old school. I just came here to check it out and yes, sure, to escape sort of the chaos on the other side of the wall. But I just kept coming back to it. It sort of became addictive, and before I knew it, all of these new land masses, these new quests, I sort of fell in love with the game again, and that's really what it came down to. I think throughout the years, RS3 has really ground down my like for that game, and I was playing it because that's the thing I always did, right? Like, I would log into RuneScape every day. I would find something to do, and it had really become how to describe, like a habit, I suppose. I don't want to say chore, but when you do something just because that's what you've always done, that's what RuneScape was for me. And old school really showed me again what it was that made me start playing RuneScape to begin with, and that has waned somewhat at times, but that's the thing that I keep coming back to.
Yeah, and in many ways, I think that's because it's a simpler game at the core of it. It's the point and click thing that is called an MMO, but there's many aspects of it that aren't very similar to traditional MMOs, and
Exactly,
I also
exactly.
think that's a huge success for the game.
And whether it's a good or a bad thing, the game has just stayed so much truer to its original, formula. And it's that formula that I fell in love with. Not like, I don't know if I could start playing RS3 right now if I came into it cold.
Yeah, and I think one of the really interesting things with that is that I question, for me in particular, and I question for everybody else who's coming from WoW at this point in time, is that are the game graphics an impediment? Is the user interface of the game client an impediment? Is the furious nature at which you need to interact with the mouse to move between user interface and game world in combat an impediment towards what you're used to? Or is that something that is liberating? If there was somebody who was coming from RS3, coming from WoW, another MMO, those would be my main questions towards them. Because my first impression of this game when we started was that, oh, this is a nice trip back in time. This is a nice trip back in time. This is a nice nostalgia trip. I can remember when I was training out here back in 2003, 2005, 2007, 2008, in this various area of the game world when it looked like this, and I was doing these training methods. That was my initial start from the game, and that's what kept me going through early to mid game, and this is the controversial take here, is that when that nostalgia ended, the game became unfun for me.
That's interesting. I mean, these questions, are these an impediment? Maybe, and this is maybe where the controversial take of plugins come in, right? Where I think that plugins have really taken these rough edges off, and for better or worse, we're now in a situation where, if you go back to the base client, the official client, there is still a lot of these rough edges, and I think there's a lot of things that I would consider an impediment. Is the game perfect when you add like 50 layers of RuneLite colored paint on top of it? No, it's not perfect. But
no game is perfect like that.
No game is perfect. That being said, there are still massive communities around playing very retro games, playing old Zelda games, old Mario games, the speedrunning community, all of those, randomizer communities. People do go back to those old games, and they have the equivalent of plugins where, randomizer tends to like patch things out, like cutscene skips and, like getting rid of some of the annoying things. But people do go back to those games despite their quote unquote jank, and I think the jank becomes so intertwined with the game that, if you go in and you decide you want to, evolve combat by including action bars and a more dynamic combat system, I do think you lose something so fundamental that the game becomes, in a sense, unrecognizable.
Yeah, and see, that's the thing that's one of the issues I have with plugins as well, is, what's the line, right? What's the line for what is an acceptable plugin in terms of...
Look, yeah.
I just wanted to say the two that immediately come out for me is one, the Clue Helper, because that is actually now in the official client, and Quest Helper. I just want to point to those two initially.
Yep.
And I have told you, and I'll tell everybody else, that if I come back to old school full time or in a meaningful way, I'm not using RuneLite, because I am somebody who prefers a pure game experience. I am very much against mods in pretty much every game that I play, and I realize that when looking at old school, I don't want to use plugins to play the game. That was something else that stood out to me in the last month and a bit, is that the RuneLite plugin list, and just how much I have built up over the last 2 years to build what is the modern old school experience for so many people, that annoyed me. And I said, no, that's not happening. And I realize that's a detriment to myself, but so be it.
Yeah, I think it's an irrational anger in that sense, in that, I mean, I get it.
But here's the thing. Here's why it's irrational, and you're right on that, is because what's the line between a plugin in a boss fight that tells me when to prayer switch versus one that would just do it for me? That's something that has arbitrarily been put in place by the community and the integrity team.
No. Oh, that's official Jagex rules.
I know. That is something that has arbitrarily been chosen by Jagex.
Look, that is a, in a sense, that difference does not need to exist if this was a single player game, right? Where you can cheat all the way. The fact that this is a multiplayer game does mean that there needs to be, some level of baselines, and that's what we have to deal with plugins. I think that, I in a sense, I agree that wouldn't it be great if plugins weren't needed and the base game experience was so good that it allowed all of that. But realistically, that doesn't happen. Like, almost all of the games that I end up playing for more than 100, 200 hours, at some point I'm going to go in and grab some mods that at least add some level of quality of life, at least for the way that I play the game. And
yeah, and say I'm 100% opposite. I will never do that, and I don't change settings. I might change a keybind here or there, but that's it.
Yeah.
So tyranny of the default, as they say, in that regard.
Yeah, moving back to like things being an impediment, right? Like I remember being on a podcast episode for our RuneScape 3, where we talked about the evolution of combat in like a Patreon exclusive.
Everything
way
okay
back
over
when.
there?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought I heard like an alarm.
Oh, sorry. That's the siren.
Okay, fair enough. All good. No, carry on. I'm not editing this show.
You're not oh my god, we're going out raw. Yeah, so like one of the things we talked about is the tick system, right? The tick system, in a sense, is a piece of legacy in both of the RuneScape games.
Yeah.
And there's always a lot of discussion about, we're going to get RuneScape 4 very soon, and it's not going to have the tick system anymore. This is a myth. It's bullshit.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's the biggest conspiracy out there. The reason I bring it up is because we talked to a few people on that episode that absolutely love the RuneScape 3 combat system, and when we talked about the tick system in particular, yes, it is an impediment, right, to the game as a whole, but there is also a certain sense of pride and achievement in learning that system and overcoming that impediment. And the moment you start counting in ticks in your daily life, essentially, right? You live and breathe ticks. That is considered, a good thing. Like there's skill.
And I have to
expression.
say, that is the point I am at in my RS3 PVM, and that skill has actually helped me on old school. I will say that.
Yes, but the thing is, right? Jank, you can approach it from a negative side, but also overcoming that jank and overcoming some of these mechanics and impediments can become a form of skill expression. If you look at some of the things caused by spaghetti code that cause you to combo eat Karambrons, that became like such an important mechanic in the game.
Yeah.
And it's sort of part of, now you no longer just have like an interesting game. You have all of these sort of almost layers of archaeology, layers of history that are causing the game to have all of that extra layer of depth, and exploring that is, I don't know, interesting.
And not only can you do it in combat, the best woodcutting and mining XP per hour uses that exact same thing on old school.
Yeah, exactly. And I would never do that because RSI, be damned. But like, you could say, we should patch out all of these things, but in a sense, emergent gameplay is what incorporates the community into the game, right? Like, this is the thing. If you look at old school as an artifact, right, in the future as sort of a historic thing, you will no longer just look at the game, but you will also look at how it interplays with the community, how to exploit new techniques, and brought those back into the game. And I think having a game that has all of these impediments, it's similar to speedrunning, right? New glitches are still being discovered in Ocarina of Time, which is about as old as I am as a game. And they're still discovering new glitches and new routes for speedrunning, because that game is probably the buggiest game that was ever released in all of history of gaming.
And
so that's why I think
I just want to say,
works.
and I just want to say, to piggyback on that, the speedrunning category on Twitch is absolutely huge, especially for those old Zelda games that you were talking about. So because of that, you can see why old school gets some of its charm from that angle as well.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And this was a wild discussion from our first impressions. Yours a very different one than mine.
And welcoming. I do need to say I am surprised by how nice it is coming into the game as a noob. And, the one memory that is etched in my brain is that one time we were questing together and there was this player yelling something along the line, so if you go get them or something, some kind of encouragement. Just
Right.
a random stranger.
Yes.
I'm like,
I remember that.
mm-hmm.
Another
like
one
that-
that's in that same category is in my early woodcutting at Yanil, or not Yanil, Drainer with the Willows. Somebody came out there and looked after me for a while to make sure I didn't get hit by the wizards.
Exactly. And like that, I feel that kind of experience you only get if you're new into the game. And that, I will fully admit, that is probably part of the reason why I fell in love with the game again, right? It's not just the game itself, it is it as disconnected as I feel to most of the other players, it is a community.
Yeah. Yeah. And that leads us to the mid-game. I think the mid-game was perhaps the biggest and best area of the game for me up to this point, because this brings us to the middle / end of 2023 and the start of 2024 here, with a bookmark out for Leagues 4, which we'll go to next. But OSRS mid-game, I have to say, skilling-wise, pretty good. Pretty good.
It is amazing to see how it has developed, and it is not something that you will ever know unless you go through it again. And in RS3, I've never really played an alt seriously. I'm too attached to all of the progression I put into my main, so I can't say for sure that RS3 has a worse mid game. Spoilers, I think it does, but it's besides the point here. But going through the mid-game experience in old school, it is the point where goals still come quickly. You can make meaningful progress in a single afternoon or a single weekend of play. And there's so many to choose from, so many goals to make. And to me, that's the favorite part of the game. It is crafting your own path, which the mid-game excels at.
Yeah, and that's the same attitude I took largely for the group Ironman on RS3 after doing that in old school. Is what is the short, medium, and long-term end goals that we're going for? What is the path to get there, and how can you lay that out in a way that's appealing to you? So I think old school really does indeed excel at that. Spoilers for me, I think that the RS3 mid-game and early game, especially on Ironman, is equally as compelling. But like you said, you haven't really done a new account seriously on RS3, so you have the old school opinion on that. And I think if everybody could stay at one portion,
wait to tell me I don't care about your opinion, you're wrong. But
I'm just saying if I'm just saying you can have that opinion, but until you do it, it might be challenged. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
That's all I'm saying there. Leagues 4?
That was a roller coaster. We went into that completely blind.
Yeah, and that was one of the main reasons for starting the show.
We went into it, at least I went into it, just thinking, what the is all of this hype about? Right? Like, why do people care so much? It's a temporary game mode. Yeah, sure, it's going to be fast, but you're just going to plow through and do it, and that's fine. And then I started playing it, and oh my god, I'm going to apologize to my family because I was on the phone during Christmas doing leagues whenever I could. It was addictive. It was amazing, and it completely surprised me. I surprised myself playing leagues, but the game mode completely surprised me.
And for me, I like the idea of it. I like the game mode. I like what it does, but I have not had a good leagues experience yet for myself. And I think the problem with that is that I never fully meta-slaved. And this is a controversial take for you, because this is again something that you don't agree with. In every other game that I play, whether it be an MMO, a shooter, what have you, I always gravitate towards whatever the current meta option is. And for both the leagues that we've had, I have decided to go forth with my own path. And I made that decision, and I have come out of both of them, but mostly the first one, less so the second one, because that was a time commitment issue. I always have wondered, if I had done what the meta option was, would I have had a different experience here? But with that being said,
the get-go that choosing Ascania's first region was dumb.
Yeah. Which is the PVM region when you look at it in terms of what's there.
Yeah.
So, I could have restarted, but by that point, we were more than halfway through it. I thought, no, I don't need to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I agree with you in that the game mode itself is absolutely fun.
So are you going to meta slave in RS3?
Yes.
Leagues?
Yes. Yes. I think that's the only option going forward for me.
Interesting.
But
you said you were going to meta slave after Leagues 4, and then you didn't in Leagues 5. So we'll see.
Because I was sold on a very interesting path to take, and I realized it was also a
Yahoo!
Taxi.
If you hear this, Faxi, it's all your fault.
It was a hipster path because only 2% of the population had Kandarin.
Kandarin is great, though.
It was great for skilling.
Justice for Kandarin. Kandarin, yeah.
It was. It just got power crept a lot in Leagues 5.
That's fair.
But anything else on Leagues for you?
No.
And all of this led to an understanding for me. And that understanding, and you can tell me if you had a similar aha moment for this, was that no matter what kind of RuneScape it is, you're still doing RuneScape-y things at the end of the day. Old school, of course, has the extra layer of being more community-driven, having the polls, and being that step, that fork rather, not necessarily a step into, but now a fork off from where things were in summer of 2007. But RuneScape is RuneScape at the end of the day, I think was one of my big things that came from this. And I had always had a suspicion of old school that, I would never like that game. But even though the graphics were not high fidelity, and even though there was, like you said, a lot more jank around the edge, the understanding is that RuneScape is RuneScape. And it's enjoyable.
I think, I had a similar insight, but it's a little bit different to me in that, and I talked about this earlier in the show, where I do think that RS3, for me, has become too far removed from the experience that I loved and enjoyed for that to still be enjoyable. I don't say that to invalidate everybody who actually loves RS3 and loves what it has become. I know some people do, but for me, the new quests don't really tend to work. Like the themes around them, the combat system just doesn't click. The sort of direction with the updates, like the daily chores, daily scape, the focus on ever pushing sort of the end game, they're all valid choices. And every time I look at them, I'm like, that's not the thing that originally appealed to me in RuneScape, and old school has stayed closer to that core experience, and that's, I think, also what it markets. That's what it tries to maintain, which I think is valid, right? Like you say, they're forks. It's not that one is necessarily objectively better than the other. It's what you're looking for. I, in general, don't mind playing retro games. I like playing the old Zelda games, despite them being super janky, hard, and buggy. Some people just can't stand that, and they want high AAA graphics and play the latest Call of Duty every year because it looks so pretty with the new shaders. And both of those are completely valid opinions. So I think my insight, my understanding came much earlier. I'm like, oh, this is what I've been looking for in RS3, and why I've been so frustrating, because RS3 comes so close, right? Of all of the other games that exist out there, RuneScape 3 came so close to what I wanted, but wasn't quite there.
Yeah, and I think for the position that RS3 is in right now, I think with everything that's happening in relation to the community discussion on monetization, that's masking all those issues that you're talking about. I will say that the conclusion to the most recent Desert series has been more grounded and has been more traditional in that regard. We'll see what happens after this, but I feel like the Desert series is a positive step in that direction for what you were talking about. But on the flip side, we just got to mask it. The boss this week, it has been my favorite boss that has been added to the game to this point in time. But like you said, it is probably pretty far from what a RuneScape boss
It's probably
would be.
unrecognizable if you show it to an old school player who has never engaged with the RS3 combat system, right? And that's the thing. I remember from RuneFest, and I remember sort of I keep an eye on it, right? Like it feels bad completely abandoning RuneScape 3, so I keep an eye on the updates. I haven't read all the blogs, but it does seem like they are sort of moving back into the more traditional space. But to me, the gap has already been created, and I don't think if that can ever be closed.
Yeah,
Which
and I mean,
fine. It's something I've come to terms with. It's something that if I never log in on my RSV character ever again, there's a certain sadness to it, right? But it's the same kind of sadness that you feel if you leave like a certain stage of your life behind. If you leave like move from like one house where you have lived for like 10 years to the next one. But yeah, also nostalgia, I guess, in a sense.
yeah, and it's a question, I think, too, of is there a space for RuneScape to try and be that modern MMO, or should it just go back to what it was? And one of the things that old school has led me to in terms of having discussions about is, what would the road not taken look like if what is now RS3 didn't do the Sixth Age and didn't do the evolution of combat.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be a very interesting alternate reality to peep into. But that brings us to old school's endgame and where we're at right now. And, that has led us to the conclusion of our questing adventure primarily. And many folks will know that two of the last quests people often do are both Dragon Slayer 2 and Desert Treasure 2. And after Sins of the Father, I was combated out at this point. And I said, no, that's okay. You go ahead. I'll watch the quests and be there in spirit.
Yeah. Which I mean was never my preferred outcome. It did feel bad, but I think at some point, know your own limits is very important, and yeah.
I still have it in my mind to level up the stats a bit and do them one day.
Yeah, I mean, there's now a new thing in the game called the Gem Crab that we talked about last week. Just park your character there and max combat stats. That will definitely give you a bit more margin.
Yeah, and like we have said, Varlamore in itself in all three batches, I think the second one was my low point for it, but overall, it's a textbook thing. It was one of the greatest things we discussed on the podcast, and I have other things I'd like to do in terms of my old school endgame, and these are things that are, just burning a hole in the back of my head that, I'd like to come back and do this one day. I'd like to come back and get 99 farming. I'd like to finish off the Questscape, as I mentioned. I'd like to do more with the Volcano and the Blast Mine, and let's just level these skills up a little bit more. So I definitely have things that I'd like to do. It's just a question of sitting down and doing them when it feels right.
And before you know it, you'll be addicted again.
Right, and see, that's the thing. My endgame seems to be a much more skilling-focused endgame than yours. Because
you're just gonna make you'll end up making a level 3 skiller and then just playing.
Hey, and that's the other thing that came to mind too, is that if this happens and I get 99 farming and I do some of these other skilling things and I really enjoy it, that to me would also be another optimal fun, well, not optimal, but another fun way to play old school. And I don't really feel the need to do combat in PvM because I have many other games where I can do that, RS3 being one of those. So I think I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
That is okay to not do everything, right?
I think so. And I think that is an important lesson for everybody to learn, especially as we have some of these crazy game modes in the game that, Ultimate Ironman is not for everyone. Let's just say that. And as old school grows, a lot of things we are seeing is horizontal content, and I think it is completely fine to not engage with the full part of it. And between old school and RuneScape 3, I think old school does a better job at not making you feel too bad about it, because there's no item at the end of it all that says
cape.
that says, great, you did it. I mean, there's the max cape, of course, which you could even have. Sorry, I'm just in my mind. I'm taken back to because I was around when the Capes of Accomplishment were originally released. And I remember being against them.
Oh yeah, I remember people going for 99 cooking and 99 fletching just to get a cape.
Exactly, because I was worried at that time that the game became too much about completing it and not about the journey. When did the Capes of Accomplishment come out? How old was I? I was wise beyond my years, because now looking back at it, I just saw the signs on the wall. It's wow. I just realized how much I'm impressed by my younger self. But
You're
anyway,
like 14 at the time.
Yeah. Okay. So interestingly, interesting thought. Anyway, my end game is looking very different. Of course, I'm having a blast doing raids every week now. I like the fact that the game, for me, the progression, like, oh my god, the mid-game bosses that they added in the last 2 years, Scurious, Moons, Royal Titans, all of that.
I do have it on my list to go back to Scurious at some point too.
Because
I had an absolute fun time at him on Leagues.
They have made such a difference, and they have made the combat system so much more approachable. I remember doing Leagues 4. I remember utterly failing at the Gauntlet. I think I could now reasonably finish the Gauntlet on my main without too much trouble, because all of the mechanics, gear switching, prayer switching, movement, are all things I now do on a regular basis. And the end game, the thing I love about it is I feel I now have the tool set, right? I've learned how to prayer switch. I've learned the tick system. I learned how food and healing works. I've learned all of these tiny things. It's taken me 2 years, but I've learned all of these tiny things. And now the game has all of these end game challenges that test me on this. And it's largely execution. And first of all, noticing the progression I have since when I first started the game, that's already amazing. But also noticing where I still have trouble and where after a bit of practice I can actually still get better. it just feels so good not having reached the skill ceiling yet. And that's for me what the end game is all about. Yes, there's all of these grinds that I would love to get through, but it is getting to the point where not knowing things and not having the combat stats, those are now no longer factors, and really I can fully focus on actually becoming
on the mechanics. And
exactly.
And looking at it from that perspective, it's just absolutely, I'll say, absurd, or maybe the other word that people like to use at this point is wild to me, that prayer switching, movement, and gear switching, 3 of those things plus everything else that you just mentioned, are combat mechanics, and there's no action bar to streamline that, and there's no setting up of hotkeys aside from opening up panes.
You say streamline, I say complicate.
No, I honestly think that would, if I had a set of hotkeys to switch my prayers between the 3 prayers and eat my food, I think that would go a long way.
If I had a hotbar to switch my prayers and eat my food, I would have quit already.
And there's the difference right there.
Mm-hmm.
That would make all the difference for me. And not even just a bar, just adding a few more hotkeys so that you could say this button turns on protect melee, this one protect range, this one protect magic, and this one allows you to eat food. 4. That's all I'm asking for.
The thing is, it becomes the same slippery slope that you hate so much about plugins.
And see, that's the thing. Could that be a plugin, or should that be native to the game? Obviously, it can't be a plugin.
Well, it's not allowed to be a plugin.
No, it's not allowed to be. But I'm just saying, if there was no wall, could it be?
Plugins are not allowed to simulate any inputs into the game.
But let's just forget for a minute. Let's just say for a minute that doesn't exist. Would that plugin be made? Let's just say that rule doesn't exist for a minute. Okay.
Absolutely. You can get unofficial RuneLite plugins that aren't in the plugin hub that will literally switch your chat prayers for you.
Yeah, and then you roll the dice about whether or not that gets caught and whether or not your account gets banned.
Yes.
So. But that was my main thing, is that if that border disappears, is that plugin made? And then as a result of that, with everything that is focused around the community aspect of the game, is that not something that
I think it just takes the challenge? It takes the equal. It takes the equal. So, I mean, to go back to the metaphor of speedruns, right? Within the speedrunning community, there is a separate sort of sub-community around TAS. And TAS stands for Tool Assisted Speedruns. And essentially what you do is, instead of the speedrun being executed by a human, all of the inputs are pre-programmed so that you can always execute 100% perfectly, so that it really doesn't become about execution. It really only comes about finding the fastest route throughout a game. Right?
Yeah.
That is of interest to people. There are separate leaderboards for that. Because it would, of course, not be fair to compare someone who uses a TAS to someone who uses a normal controller. This is also why things like repeater controllers that automatically repeat inputs like every frame are generally not allowed with speedruns. You need those limitations to create an equal ground when it comes to comparing yourself to other people, which is always what will happen in an MMO.
Right, but my thing is that
if you want this shit, go and play on a private server.
But my point is with that is that would the community at large want this, or are they okay with how it is right now? If you gave them a choice, which way would they go? That's my question.
If you gave them a choice, I think if you gave them a choice, they would really not allow this. Because too much of the existing achievements, as much as it's not necessarily true, but people would feel like it diminishes the achievements that they have made before the system was in place.
Okay.
And there's something to be said for that.
And that's my thing with plugins, is that the line feels arbitrary in that regard in some places.
I don't think so. The only thing that plugins change, literally the only thing that plugins change, is presentation.
I think Quest Helper and the Clue thing are.
It is only
two big ones.
presentation.
So
It is only presentation.
all right. Well, with that, we should probably move on to some questions from one of our community contributors, unless you have anything else you'd like to mention about endgame progression.
Nope.
Okie dokie. So we're going to start this off with one from Necromatus. What was you and Sirion's favorite quest and why? Do you want to go first or should I?
You go first.
Do you know what my answer is?
I think it is going to be between two quests I have in my mind.
All right. It's Garden of Death.
Yeah, that was one of the two answers.
And what was the other one?
Secrets of the North.
Oh, God. Those are my top two. Garden of Death, because it is fully environmental storytelling. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen, either on Old School or RS3. And I just love it when there's a little nugget of mystery that is attached to it, and we don't learn everything throughout the entirety of the quest. So that's why when we did our Desert Treasure 2 Lore Diggers episode and our most recent Varlamore episode from when we talked about the quest up north, the Custodia quest, I was looking to see where all these things would lead in, but Desert Treasure 2 is definitely the bigger one on that. But oh my God, Garden of Death. That's my answer to that question.
Okay. Well, you're going to know what my favorite quest is. It's pretty obvious.
Desert Treasure 2?
No, it's Rat Catchers. Come on.
Are you pulling my leg?
Yes, of course I am. I find the answer to this really, really hard. Desert Treasure 2, in my opinion, yes, I think it is my favorite quest. I considered also picking Garden of Death because it feels a little bit unfair to pick Desert Treasure 2 as my favorite quest, but since you already gave Garden of Death the time in the spotlight that it deserves, let me just make the case for Desert Treasure 2 here. The thing that I really love about Desert Treasure 2 and to a lesser extent Dragon Slayer 2 as well is that they truly feel epic. You can't just sit down and play them. I mean, you can. I don't recommend it. But like finishing Desert Treasure 2 took me multiple days of game sessions, right? Dragon Slayer 2 took me 2 or 3 days as well. It really is the representation of this epic quest that takes you all over the world. And it really captures that idea of the original Dragon Slayer, right? Where you had to get these map pieces in all these different parts of the map and put them together and slay this dragon. It really did that, but on an epic scale. The thing, though, that really sold me on Desert Treasure 2 is tone.
That's fair.
Like,
That's
if you
fair.
actually asked me about like my top 5 or maybe top 10 quests, unironically, looking back over the whole thing, I think Underground Pass might be in there. And which is crazy because I absolutely dislike that quest from a mechanical standpoint.
Oh, yeah.
But that was the first foray in this really serious, mature tone that Old School has. And it does it so well, and we get some of that energy back with the Undercity segment of Desert Treasure 2. I'm not a big zombie fan, but the vibes of the Stranglewood are really unpleasant and gave me the heebie-jeebies. Which, if you think about it, with the graphical limitations we have, that is really impressive.
That's good that it can do that. That is good that it can do that.
So it did. There were annoying sections in Desert Treasure 2. I don't think it is a 10 out of 10 quest. But it really took the entire engine, the entire game, and showed all of the tricks it could do in one single quest. And it did none of them to an extent where I want to bury that quest and never go back to it and have it, put at the top of a rocket and shot onto the moon like Ratcatchers. And also Forgetful Tail. My God, can we please kill Forgetful Tail?
Yeah. Ratcatchers and Forgettable Tail are two of the quests that are still red on my list, and I have no desire to play those.
I do need to give an honorable mention to the Frog Quest.
Yes. Absolutely. And my favorite thing about that is that I can tell people who are from RS3 to go spend an afternoon on Old School, go unlock Varlamore and do the Frog Quest, and they can. That's the best part about it. So, next question as well from Necromatus. What was your favorite segment or update to talk about in OSRS and why? Do you want to go first?
I'm thinking because this is such a tough one.
Okay, I'll go first, and I'm going to make it spicy. Sailing Alpha.
Oh,
because
that was
because there's still a significant portion of the community against sailing. We were against sailing. We came to an acceptance of it and enjoyed parts of it, both playing it at RuneFest, but also on the alpha. And then the direction the beta took after that with crew and combat was a bit of a regression. But I think the reason I like talking about that sailing alpha so much was that we made the case for something that we might not be 100% okay with, the both of us.
Yeah.
And, the people are still very polarized about sailing. So I like my controversy.
You like your controversy.
And people will know I've been pushing you a little bit this episode.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
I know. That's not gonna end, I think. I feel the worst is yet to come, so my favorite segment, I'm gonna choose something really recent because that's really the only thing that comes to mind, which, there's so many episodes to talk about. No. Oh, there's actually two. Can I cheat and do two?
Yeah.
So one of them was just 2 weeks ago when we talked about Varlamore Batch 3. And the fact
oh my God, that was great.
We could talk about an endgame boss from first-hand experience was a massive shift in how we approached updates up to that point. Like, it was one of the few times where I felt confident and capable of talking about things without feeling that I'm spouting bullshit.
And that's the thing about podcasting people don't know. If you don't know, you either get somebody on the show that knows, or you do the research that you have to do, and you make that bullshit that comes out of your mouth sound convincing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we did a decent job, and we made our fair share of mistakes throughout this show, but that to me was sort of the culmination where I was like, you know what? Damn, I can actually talk about all of these mechanics. Not because I'm copying from the wiki page. I mean, I had the wiki page open and did my research, but I could extrapolate and understand how it interacted with the rest of the game mechanics. To me, that represented a major shift. The other segment I really loved talking about was when we talked about us doing the latest quest in the desert storyline. Because...
Which one was that?
Oh, what's the name of the quest? It's the one in that area east of Sophanum where you go under the thing and you meet Scabaras, I think, or
Oh, the
Priest of
one that is the
Scabaras.
precursor
Tombs.
to Tombs and its mini
Yes.
quest. Oh, what's the name of it?
Beneath Cursed
Beneath
Sands.
Cursed Sands. There you go.
Yes.
Yes.
I loved
Okay,
that.
that was good. That was good.
I enjoyed that quest. I enjoyed having the discussion of the desert lore and exploring that, and I had a really good time with that.
Yeah. Okay. I'll agree with that too. Again, another modern OSRS quest. It's almost like these modern OSRS quests are actually really good and they know what they're doing when they make them.
Yeah.
And then the next question before we get into our back and forth, favorite episode?
That's an easy one. The first Yes We Missed, we did.
Okay.
Because the first year after old school RuneScape became a thing was absolutely wild, and I knew none of it.
Yeah. And if there was one reason to continue this show and one thing I want to get done on this show again, it's finishing the Years We Missed series. If this thing were to ever resume again. But for my episode, I'm going to go spicy again.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm going to say?
No.
I'm going to say the Pride episodes, because nobody else in the YouTube creator space is willing to touch this because it's bad for engagement. We did because it was the proper and right thing to do, aside from agreeing with the language that was put out by Jagex on this.
Mm-hmm.
And part of doing these shows is knowing when to use your platform for good. And those episodes were a reason for that.
Yeah. That is fair enough. I remember I definitely remember both the Pride episodes very clearly.
And it's just such an awkward, toxic space online in the gaming space in this day and age in relation to that sort of content, and it often gets shut down. But we have the luxury that with OSRS update and RS3 update, we don't need to worry about the viewer numbers on YouTube for this, because this is primarily an audio first podcast that goes out to all the wonderful people and their podcast listeners. That is the first thing that we are looking at on this. We're not necessarily looking to optimize for YouTube clicks and whatnot. And I mean, if people were looking to do that, you see why content creators and the like prefer not to touch those sort of things. But when the game update talked about it, we're there.
Yeah.
All right. Your first question to me.
Maybe you should give the listeners some context. So we decided that this is the last sort of chance we got. We decided to challenge each other and do a little bit of a back and forth and ask our own questions that otherwise we might never have covered on the show. So this might get spicy. It might not get spicy. Shane has given me a heads up that it might get spicy. So I'm going to start with one that you've touched upon already, but maybe you can talk about that a little bit more, which is, what is the biggest takeaway from this sort of journey that we did here in Old School? What is sort of your biggest takeaway, and how will it change both how you play and how you cover RuneScape 3?
My biggest takeaway is that there has been a series of errors on the RS3 team going back to 2013 to probably about 2018 that culminated in the content and updates that were made during those years. Granted, yes, they were all successful to the metrics that they put out, but there has been a lot of discussion that has taken place on the RS3 side in recent months about monetization in particular, but that is a mask for so many other issues that exist. Issues that don't exist on the old school side. That issues that need to be addressed in that game if it's going to be long-term viable. And for me, that's something that is very worrying to me because RS3 is my primary game now. And I hope that those things are going to be addressed. So that is maybe the biggest thing that I walk away from as I walk away from old school, putting it down for a bit, that's rattling around in the back of my head.
How will that change? Like, does that change how you're going to cover like that show as well? Like, are you going to try and take some of the, try and push some of the things that old school does?
Well,
or
see, here's the thing: we're kind of beholden to the bi-yearly RS Ahead live streams to know which way the direction of the game is going. In that regard, we're finishing up what was announced at RuneFest, with the next one going to come either this month or next month, early in October. And then based on that, we'll be able to see which way the game content is going and which way the monetization is going. But there are definite things outside of monetization that we are going to be talking about. And a lot of those things center around how easy it is to get XP, the daily challenges, the daily grinds, those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Cool.
Now for you.
Oh, God.
No, the first one's an easy one. First one's an easy one. Given everything that we've been through and where we're at today, what is one update in old school that you would like to see made to it going forward?
Oh my God, that's so similar to a question I was going to ask you. I'll ask you that next. What update would I like to see made to old school? I think that changes like to the official plugin and to the official client and making plugins work there, I think will go a long way, because right now we do have, of course, the Java client, which works fine, but has its problems, especially around, it's much more friendly for bots, so to speak, as well. So
yeah, that's something Mod Ash talked about in his recent Q&A on Reddit, is that they get at times flack from the game integrity team about RuneLite and the Java client and maintaining that for so long, because it makes cheating with bots easier.
Exactly. So I think that is probably the biggest change. But I would actually like to go the other way as well and say, the early game experience really needs to be retouched. I think.
Really?
Yeah. It is something that you and I can go to pretty quickly, but I think from like a completely new user experience, especially in the free-to-play environment, like free-to-play has really not gotten a lot of love at all.
Okay. Well, I don't think you're going to ask me that question next, because that was my answer to this question.
Nah. I'll still ask the question, because I will phrase it maybe in a way that allows you to think about it a little bit harder. But if you could propose one update, any update for old school, right? But it had to pass a green light poll, what would it be?
An accessibility and user experience pass.
Oh, do you care to explain? I know where you're coming from, but
I have problems reading the chat in old school. One of the first things I looked at when starting this was if RuneLite could change the chat text box. It can't, because I wanted a modern sub-pixel rendered font for the game. That was something I could control in terms of size without relying on UI scaling. Granted, that wouldn't need to pass a poll, because they don't put the user experience and accessibility stuff like that through polls. But if I could bring one thing that would be non-controversial to the game, that would probably be that.
I mean, it can be controversial. It just only has to be controversial to less than 30% of the community.
My absolute most controversial take is that I would remove the polling system.
Yes, I am aware of that. Yes.
But And I would add,
which is why I decided to tease you a little bit by forcing you to have to go
I
past
know,
that.
and I would add the hotkeys that I mentioned and all that. But yeah,
that's why I added this particular
okay.
suffix
So if it has to pass the poll and it's not, I know usability and accessibility don't need to, but if it had to pass a poll, I love the farming skill. Let's have another farming expansion.
Yeah, fair enough. God, I gave you a free platform. I put up the ball on the dot for you to kick in, and you didn't even mention Elemental Workshop 4. I'm so disappointed. Or free, even.
Oh, that is something we regularly push for on the RS3 side, so I have done plenty on that, so I feel like I don't need to here.
All right. Cool. Yeah, well, that was my second question for you.
All right. Then now I'm going to ratchet up the heat a little bit here.
Oh, boy. Okay.
Without using what I mentioned about the keybinds and the hotbars and all that, what is one update or directional change that they would make to the game that would make you sour on OSRS?
I could be very spicy and say sailing.
I mean, you could, but that's a foregone conclusion at this point. It's like the wind; you just got to accept it.
Yeah, exactly. This is a tough one. I mean, it's you can't tell the future. That's all of the obvious things, right? Like the moment they add something like a daily system, that would sour me. The moment that we get a achievement system with win score, with rewards for that kind of stuff would sour me. Which sounds strange because I do like my achievement diaries, I do like my combat achievements, but the moment we go beyond that and everything becomes about ticking boxes, that's, I think, the moment I tap out.
Yeah. Okay. That's fair because a lot of people don't necessarily understand your current perspective of RS3. I feel like I understand that probably the best out of anybody, and that answer to that question makes sense.
Yeah, I think like for the longest time, one of the main things that I really cared about a lot in RS3 is I wanna feel like my achievements are earned. And through Treasure Hunter, I never bought keys, but of course I used my daily keys. And so much XP, so many useful items come out of that, to the point where whenever I started getting a 99 or some other achievement, it wasn't causing that euphoria anymore. It wasn't causing that sense of I did this. I put the time and effort in it. This is fully on me.
Yeah.
That completely moved away, which actually caused me to stop using any of the free keys that they gave me, which actually the game makes reasonably hard because it reminds you at any particular moment that you have keys left. And I did this for archaeology, where I didn't use any bonus XP. I didn't use any double XP weeks. I didn't use any lamps or anything on archaeology. And besides the fact that that is, in my opinion, the pinnacle of what a skill should look like, when I got that 99 and when I got that 120 after that, that's one of the proudest I felt for achieving something. Anything in old school that takes that away from me would immediately sour me.
Fair enough. My next question for me?
Oh, see, I went much lighter on these. See, I'm bringing I'm bringing the happy stuff on this side. What achievement, whether that be related to the show or the game in the last 2 years around old school, are you the proudest of?
Oh, that's difficult.
Hmm.
Maybe the problem is that I don't have an easy answer to this question.
I mean, it can also be related to the show.
I know, and I think from looking at it from that perspective, the thing that I'll say is that I have proven to myself and hopefully others that there is a very real blueprint out there for starting podcasts and getting them off the ground and rolling to at least some degree of success in terms of building listener bases for this. And we've seen this a lot in the comments on the episodes that we have had, which we set this up initially as a 10 episode pilot to run during leagues, right? And we decided to continue beyond that, but it wasn't until into 2024 that we actually first hit lightning and brought a lot of people on this adventure for us and saw people having those discussions in the comments. So creating a space to allow people to discuss these things from a relatively smart angle, I think is one of the things I'm most proud of in relation to the show.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The next one for you, and again, we're going on the spicy angle here. So you mentioned the poll in my one question, a question that would have to pass a green light poll, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, given everything that we've discussed, and a lot of those updates have had plenty of back and forth on them with the community before poll, in particular, I'm thinking of the Varlamore rewards and some of the combat things. What is your best argument? And you're free to choose on this one. I was going to force you into one side. What is your best argument for either? Let me rephrase this. What is your best argument for either keeping in-game polls or removing them, based on everything you've seen?
I know exactly what I'm going to answer on this one.
Okay, good.
I would keep them. I would keep them not because of the outcomes of the poll. I would keep them because of the culture that it creates. This actually touches a lot on who I am as a person, who I am professionally as well. If you look at my job, I actually, think along very similar lines. So really, this shouldn't be an answer. This should be a surprise, essentially. What the polls do is they create a common sense of ownership over the game. I think only in a space where this discussion of how the updates come to be, right? Like Jagex has gotten really good at explaining their design choices, which I think has educated a community on thinking along the same lines and has allowed them to make suggestions that aren't just wild dreams, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I can see that.
The fact that Varlamore and the reworked regions in Zaya are basically a carbon copy of a community member who decided to just make a nice region and a nice map, I don't think that could ever happen if you don't have this transparent discourse between the developers and the community. I don't see that level of high quality content suggestions on any other game. And I can only see it on games where the community management and the communication is so strong and so transparent that it is like that people who suggest these ideas can actually keep in mind real game design and technical limitations.
Right. Yeah, you don't see that in other games. I will give you that. And I guess the follow-up to this is, can you accomplish that still, even if you didn't have polls?
I think it can be done without it, but it removes a forcing function. Jagex would probably start not releasing as much information about future updates, which means we don't get as much detail, which means we get much more communication like, oh, that's a great suggestion, but we have something else in the pipeline that completely sort of obsoletes this particular proposal. And at that point, people get discouraged and don't feel as empowered anymore to give these suggestions.
Yeah. And
now I think RS3 has moved in the right direction with the right-click examine blog post, but it's still not quite the same level. And I think the polls hold Jagex accountable to the community, that they need to keep being open and transparent with us. And in return, they're getting this engaged community that talks about these polls, and that all of them, because they feel they have a voice, even though it's a tiny one and one voice among many, they feel empowered to give these suggestions and have a real stake in the game.
And I just also want to say, as a complete opposite to that, if we look at another game that I play, Star Trek Online, they're not allowed to take community suggestions at all, because if they take a community suggestion and that somehow works its way into the game, there are apparently legal entanglements for them that they are worried about.
Mm-hmm.
So that is the complete opposite end of the spectrum.
Like, if you wanted to compare this, like, it feels like all of each community member is a shareholder, so to speak. That's really the way it feels to me.
All right.
There is a common interest among both the developers and the community to keep this game rolling.
Fair enough. I have one more question for you. And listeners, no, this won't be the last time I ever get to ask him a question. I can ask him questions every day, but on the show.
All right. I have one more question as well, but you can go first.
No, this was mine to you, so you're up next.
Okay. In hindsight, what episode or update did we get completely wrong when we covered it?
Oh boy, that's an amazing question. I feel like it's probably one of the earlier combat ones. Maybe. When we were looking at some of the combat rebalance things, specifically about magic, in terms of, questioning whether or not I think we matched where the community was at the week, right? In terms of elemental weakness. And I think the community has come to accept and like elemental weakness. But if we were to look at our perspective of where the community was at that week, we were completely on the opposite side of the community. Though I think the community has come around to it at a bit, but there was that little kernel of doubt that was there, I think. And I think the second one, and maybe this is a controversial one as well, the While Gothic Sleeps episode, because we had Earth on for that episode, and his perspective was that the quest did what it needed to do. It's a quest that in effect brings the Stone of Jazz into the game, and it did what it needed to do for the goals it set out, but its implementation really just did not fit into what a Grandmaster quest was in the game. But we still had that perspective that no, this quest did what it needed to do, so maybe we were wrong on that in terms of what they should have done for that too. Those are the two that immediately come to mind.
Somewhat adjacent to this, like what is the biggest sort of, like, throughout the last 2 years, what's the biggest, like, most surprising change of heart that you've had yourself?
Me personally?
Yeah.
Me personally? About an update or just OS in general?
Just the game. Yeah, just the game in general. Yeah.
If you I was on vacation in one of the farthest reaches from the world, and somehow the news got to me in February 2013 that they were doing OSRS. And I was absolutely livid about that. So if you were going to say, what is your biggest change of heart about old school? It's going from something that I absolutely, completely did not want to exist, resented Jagex for, resented the community, resented people in our own community for playing, to something that I could have a podcast about. That is perhaps one of the biggest 180s that this show has delivered.
I don't think you're going to top that answer,
no,
so I'm going to stop asking questions.
And I mean, if you want to know how livid I was when this news came to me, go ask somebody like Earth. I'm sure he was one of the first people that heard from it.
Oh, I thought you were going to say, go to this and this place and see the little crater that I punched into a wall or something like that.
No, you know what the hilarious thing was? Is I was up on top of a mountain in southern New Zealand, and then I get back down to the parking lot and we check the news, and holy crap, old school's happening. That's literally how I found out about it.
Amazing.
A lot of people probably haven't heard that story, but there you have it. An hour, 29 minutes into the last episode of this update, the most controversial thing to ever happen to RuneScape. There you go, that the community now loves.
Mm-hmm. All right, come at me with your last question.
This is an easy one.
The spiciest one.
No, this is an easy
last.
one. I was going to ask you.
Oh, okay.
I was going to ask you something completely off the rails there, but I toned that one down in the last question. What does an RS3 player have to do who is used to the modern aspects of that game, the graphics, the combat, the faster paced aspects of it, and maybe, some paid progression? What does one of those RS3 players need to do to come to old school gracefully and find success?
Just do it. I mean, I know that's not the answer you want to hear. I do think it's truly the answer, though. It's like, just go in and play and give it a chance, right? The first impression of the graphics, the fact that, you have to start over, all of this, I understand it might take a while to get used to, but give it a chance is the biggest one. I don't think you're gonna like this answer, but I would say don't play on the official client. Literally play on RuneLite and customize the experience to take off the rough edges that stop you from doing it. I can't guarantee that there won't be niggles like the font that will put you off. Like,
that's a physical thing for me. Like, there's no way around that.
No, exactly. And there might be things about old school that, they are deal breakers for you. But if it's a small thing, it's probably been solved with a RuneLite plugin. So give that a chance. Customize your experience and immerse yourself. That's really all it takes. Start with baby steps, right? Start with small things. Go and do some quests. Definitely try out some of the new content as well. Don't just try and do the nostalgia content that you know and love, because a lot of it hasn't aged well. Don't do rat catches as your first quest. That's all I'm saying. But some of the quests, the more modern stuff, is really good. If you go just slightly south of Lumbridge after you come off Tutorial Island, right? There's a quest, and I'm just double checking. Yeah, there's a quest that has no requirements, no item requirements, no skill requirements. It's called Mistalin Mystery, and it's actually.
Oh God, that was a good quest.
Need I say more? Shane just made the point for me. Just go finish Tutorial Island, go walk south a little bit, and do Mistalin Mystery.
That was
after using RuneLite.
Oh God, that's in the top 5. Okay,
that's it.
Yeah,
it's easy as that.
And this is a long show. We didn't plan out the next sections, but that's it for the Q&A. The old school community. This was something you put in here. So which direction did you want to go on this one?
I feel we need to talk about it.
Yeah.
I think we've covered all of the main beats I wanted to cover, but I do think it's important to say that I think old school has grown to a point where it is a symbiotic relationship with the community. I mean, any MMO, any game realistically can't live, or not for long, without a community. But to me, there is this sort of two-sidedness to the community, and I would love to hear your opinion on it as well. There is this side that has all of these amazing suggestions, that engages on all of these content posts. The fact that we have what I would call intelligent discussions about, best in slot items and what is good and not good for the game's long-term health. The fact that the community can make rational, useful, and real arguments rather than, I don't like it, is unique. At the same time, it also doesn't take very long peeking into the community to see an absolute buttload of toxicity, dumb, uninformed arguments, people who just will follow the best content creator they're watching, whether that is someone who is actually reasonable, to someone who is outright word. You can insert your own
disparaging.
Word there. Exactly. So I don't know where the community goes. I don't know. I feel I don't have enough of a sense of the community to see if it is changing or if it's always been this way. Part of me feels it's the internet. You can't really change this. Everybody is always going to be polarized. At the same time, yeah, I don't know. And I don't know if the community is an asset or a burden to a game like old school. It's sort of both at the same time.
Yeah.
Schrodinger's community.
No, I'll agree. I'll agree with that. Pretty much, I think.
I just don't know, like, what would win out, right? Like, what force is winning out right now?
I hope it's the good, the smart, intelligent discussions. But, I also have to agree that with the state of YouTube and short form media in this day and age, it is just too compelling at times for content creators to go in a direction that is not healthy and not conducive. And I don't know how we fix that, but like you said, that's a larger internet issue. And it would be a shame if that started to become the dominant thought nexus in old school. I don't think it is. I think the first one that you outlined is probably closer to where it is.
Yeah, it's of course incredibly hard to it's incredibly hard to get a realistic sense because there's always this vocal minority. I'm trying to make my point in a very, very sort of concise way, but it's hard on this particular topic. It just feels like the bad stuff is, but like, okay, it feels like the bad stuff is so easy to find for old school, but also the sense I get, and I don't speak from first-hand perspective, is that other game communities are worse. That's really, if you want to compare the old school community, it's
not
like
the League community.
No, exactly. And even comparing it against the RSV community, and I know this is maybe not entirely fair, but even comparing it against the RSV community and the discourse that is taking place and how every single topic seems to come back to microtransactions, maybe it's not so bad.
Well, the thing is that that's been something that people have been asking for a long time, and they've just opened up the floodgates for it. So that's why that's happening. But no, I agree with you. I think and I hope that the positive side wins out. And part of doing the show that has been so good is being able to foster a space for that. And, we have had a few people come by that have been on that opposite side that have, just been absolutely horrible in that regard to the other side of the coin. And we've dealt with them quickly in that regard. But, just, as we like to say, be smart. That's really all there is to it.
Be smart and be kind, and come and visit us on RuneFest, because that will also change your mind.
You can go visit him. I don't know that I'm going again. That probably sounded bad, but it's not bad. It's not bad. And the next thing we have in the bullet point, I feel like we talked a lot about these: design philosophy, polling, future direction of the game.
Yes. I feel we can't leave the show without talking about sailing.
I want it to be good.
Know.
I want it to succeed.
Yes, so do I. I do also think that, there are still unsolved problems. I think Jagex has gotten a lot better at polling. I think they have gotten a lot better at talking with the community. There's still things to improve. I think especially anything related to wilderness content and PKing.
Oh, I'm just thinking back to one of our most clickbaity titles of all time, talking about Rathbot and Sandbot.
Yeah,
oh, that's where
exactly.
That's where the bad sides we were just talking about came out.
Yeah, so I don't like. Sometimes I'm with you, right? I'm like, can we just get rid of the polls and can we just make decent game design decisions that aren't based on misconceptions? But
I that's also been a good thing too, is that you have highlighted to me why I don't like that kind of system. And it comes very much to the environment that I grew up in and where I grew up.
Mm-hmm. But I think overall, we will never. I at least will never fully agree with every single update and every single change that the game makes. I think that is unrealistic. Not all of the content is for me.
Yeah, that's
overall fair. Looking at Varlamore and what they did there, I think we can all agree that they knocked it out of the park.
Yes.
And as much as I worry for something like sailing, I am hopeful that in a year or maybe in 2 years we look back on it and it's as if it has never been without the game. Right?
Yeah, and never been controversial.
And never been controversial. We've talked to the people behind this, and I think this has always been core to our show, I believe, as well, is that even if we absolutely hated the content, I don't think we ever really hated the content, but even if we saw pretty severe issues, it is so important to remember that behind every single line of code, behind every single decision, there are real human people that really care a lot about this game and that we have gotten to know through RuneFest and especially you through some, back alley communication channels. That sounded more conspiratory
it's
than
not.
It is, but
it's not.
But I think one thing that I have seen confirmed is that, they want to do what's right for the game. They're all very passionate. And I think the game could not be in better hands.
Yeah, and that's the update brand, right? Shout to the highs when the content is truly great. When there are issues with it, still talk through the content piece by piece, but do so constructively. Without rage baiting, without clickbaiting and flaming people.
And we hope that with our 83, because we started with episode 0, I think.
We did.
With our 83 episodes, I hope we have contributed to the smart side of the community and helped at least some people out, because Yeah.
Sounds like a plan. And with that, that brings us to the future for both of us in game. I'll let you go for that first, because I feel like mine is the more final one for the time being.
I'm not done.
Oh,
I've got.
I thought you
No.
weren't done with the last subject. Are you trying to do the first 2-hour episode of OSRS Update?
No, no. But I'm not done with the game. I'm still having a blast. Like I said, I am working my way through the PVM encounters. I've been doing some raids. There's definitely still plenty of things for me to learn. Hopefully culminating in a beautiful Infernal Cape one day. And that's it. I mean, I'm also still playing my Iron Man. I love the challenges, the puzzle of creating my own path. I have learned so much about myself and what I enjoy about the game, and the most important part to me is recognizing that it's all about the journey and not the destination, which sounds like a cliche.
No, that is RuneScape through and through.
But that is RuneScape, and the moments I feel proudest of in all of old school are the achievements like the Fire Cape and finishing Desert Treasure 2. Really, the parts that were hard on me and took me several tries are the most rewarding parts, and I'm hoping that I get to play the game in that way through a variety of ways, hopefully, that will keep giving me those moments.
Excellent. And,
So,
based on the content that we have, I don't think you're going to run out.
Yeah, so if you're in the BitsBytes Friends chat, you'll likely see me hopping around Gielinor for the foreseeable future.
Excellent. As for me, folks, I am taking a long, well-deserved break from old school, I feel like that's something I have to do. There's only 2 things that are going to make me log in at some point in the next couple months. It's the feeling to go do a herb farming run or to activate my farming spreadsheet and go start 99 on that. But you will say, Sirion will say, no, put the game down, take a break. But the reality of it is that, the farming loop has been something that I have never tired from, even going all the way back to when farming came out 20 years ago, this past July. So even if I feel as though I don't want to interact with old school, I still might interact with that skill, but we'll see how that goes in the coming days and weeks, and what that leads to on the old school front, in terms of content and progression, and if I want to do anything. But for the immediate near-term future, it is 100% focus on the group Iron Man on RS3, determining where we go with that, where that podcast goes as those microtransaction discussions happen. I know that's something that the old school people don't have to talk about, but next week we're talking about, oh boy, the first double XP event in 12 plus years that's not going to have microtransaction items in it. So that's the kind of things that we're going to be talking about on that side while I put old school down in the immediate short term. I don't see RSB update on the RS3 side going anywhere anytime soon. So if you like hearing me, and if you like hearing my thoughts about things, or you just want a RuneScape Central podcast, try out the RS3 podcast, update.show. You can find that at, though you probably won't have any idea what we're talking about content-wise on that. And the door is not closed to coming back to OSRS, and maybe I did burn out on both leagues, and maybe I should have taken a break after those, but I have
you know what they say about RuneScape. You never really quit.
Yeah.
RuneScape.
Yeah, and the other thing I'll say is that I've played games in the past that have been far more taxing and far more annoying to play than I have ever found old school to play, and I still played those because I had people around me who were playing them, or there was some other interesting aspect of them, and I muddled through it. And And that, as we talked about, I forget whether this was this show or a different show. It's like putting a square peg in the round hole. I'm going to find a way.
Yeah, so really what Shane is saying is that I've stopped being nice to him, so that's why he's quitting old school.
No, not at all. Not at all. And you have a completely different perspective on that. Like, and I'm not talking about just playing a game for the sake of content creation. I'm talking about playing a game that you don't find actually fun, but everybody else that
I've
you know
done
is
it. I've done it.
playing it. And
I can start listing out a list of games that I've played with friends that I would never play by myself, and I don't really truly enjoy them, but you play them because it is the thing you do with your friends.
And there's an interesting aspect or another.
I think it is a totally valid take. I don't think I could do it with a game that I actively hate, and I have my my limits. But no, I've done this in the past as well.
Yeah, I think that's it. Anything else?
Well, I think all I want to say before we go is a thank you for all of the listeners. Doing this show has never been God, I can't think of the right word to say. It's never felt like something free, right? It's never felt as deserved. It felt like something you allowed us to do. It's been a privilege to be part of this, and that we hopefully we're part of all of your journey a little bit. So I feel I have to say thank you to everybody who stuck with us for the last
almost 2 years
episodes.
Yeah.
Almost 2 years. Whether you hopped in and out for single episodes or followed us religiously every week, it all matters.
Every listener matters.
Yes, because, when you're doing a podcast, you're really just shouting into a microphone, and that's all you do. It is the responses you've gotten to us, the questions you've asked, the opinions you've shared, the likes you've given that sort of have fed back into our mission, I suppose.
Yeah, and the way we start and the way I start these shows, and for people who haven't podcasted before or are new to producing, I say, imagine you're renting a room on a Sunday and you get 5 people to show up and listen to you. And the next week it's 12, and then 30, and then 100, and then 400. That's what this is. So you imagine you put that into the real world, and if you could get 50 people to show up every Sunday to listen and have a back and forth conversation with you, that's how you start the show, and that is where podcasts begin. And that is the metric that they should be measured on, at least in the beginning, because it's not about just talking at the listener. That is not what podcasts are for, in my view. They are the perfect avenue to have these two-way discussions that many people on YouTube don't have. So if we have done that at all, and if you have felt a part of that process, thank you. It is truly appreciated, and that is one of the things that I strive to do with all the shows that I record. But I would be, of course, remiss if, in addition to thanking the community on this, that I, of course, didn't thank you and didn't thank everybody else who has provided their thoughts in terms of how to build this show over the time, because building the show is perhaps the most complicated aspect of it. So thank you for providing that perspective, shaking the box, and enabling that to come to OSRS and eventually to the RS3 show in some ways too.
Yeah, and thank you for all of the editing. People might not know this, but I show up once a week and I have opinions, and then I go to bed while Shane does all of the hard work of editing all of the things together.
Publishing, managing a website, managing
polishing, all of that, exactly. Dealing with all of my many F-bombs, which, no, I don't actually swear that much on the show. But dealing with all of the editing mistakes that sometimes happen. So yeah, go and send him a thumbs up on Discord or something like that.
Indeed. And before we go, you said we weren't allowed to talk about this, but there was a wonderful Spudworks post this week about increasing world capacity, as well as the sailing resources and skill cape activity pool that is out there, as well as changes for the Varlamore release content, plus the summer sweep up combat changes. Those are all out there on the official Old School RuneScape website, and I wanted to find a way to work those into the show and to have the discussions about them. But as you can tell here, we're already an hour 54 minutes in, so that really wasn't in the cards for this. So if you want to discuss any of those pieces of content, any of those news posts, there's a Discord channel over at update.show/Discord called OS RuneScape that you can pop those into and bring those discussions forward with. And I will happily jump down the rabbit hole and discuss each of those as if they were on the podcast with anybody who is interested in doing such a thing. There, I did it.
Mm-hmm.
I did it.
You did it. You got it in the show. We had a long discussion about whether we should actually put this in the show this week or not.
No, it was you talking.
Fact...
It was you talking at me, and me realizing that you were probably one of the two people that would convince me to not do that.
But all right, I think for the very, very last time, at least for the time being, because I know we don't like permanent endings, I think that's all from me this week.
Yeah, that's it for this edition of the Old School RuneScape Update. And rather than saying we'll be back next week for another one, I'll say if you want more RSBNB Update in general, update.show is where you get everything RSBNB Update related and the entire back catalog of 83 episodes of OSRS Update. You can all find them there. They're all on YouTube, all on your favorite podcast listening service, at least for the last 25 or so, based on how they archive things. But the entire back catalog, update.show, and of course the community Discord, update.show/Discord. We're both there. We're not going anywhere. And of course, as Sirion mentioned, the BitsBytes Friends Chat as well. So with that being said, we'll see you guys around the RuneScape realms next time. See you then, everyone. Take care.
Bye.